Most of us never give a thought about tow trucks until we have an accident or a breakdown. I became interested in this topic back in the 1980s when I was writing a book about the New Jersey Turnpike. At that time, I had the good fortune to meet Mark DiGiovanni, owner of Guaranteed Motor Towing Service. This company was founded in 1926 on Easton Avenue in New Brunswick. It's a family business, and Mark represents the third generation of ownership. Today, the company maintains a fleet of tow service vehicles that operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's a fascinating business, and it's my pleasure to welcome to the studio today Mark DiGiovanni. Mark, tell us a little bit about your grandfather, Frank DiGiovanni. He founded the company.
Yeah, he founded the company in May of 1926 on Easton Avenue in Somerset, just outside of New Brunswick, and at that time it was known as West New Brunswick. He came to New Brunswick. He was a pharmacist by trade. He had gone to university in New York City, and he was told by his doctors that if he continued to work in the pharmacy trade in labs and things with chemicals, his lungs were going to deteriorate. It was not good for him. He needed to find an outside job, something where he could be, out in the environment. So he decided that at the time motor cars were becoming popular. So he thought everyone's going to end up with a motor car. So he founded Guaranteed Motor Sales, and that's how he began his operation on Easton Avenue in Somerset. He built a 1923 Cadillac car with a tow truck boom on the back that he handcrafted, and that's how he opened his business. And people today still ask me why it's Guaranteed Motor. I said because we carry the motor, because back in those days, motor cars were that's how you referred to your automobile. You have to think the horse and buggy was still around in 1926.
Huh. And then your father, Pete, what changes did he make in the business?
When we took over in 1968, we primarily moved, because my grandfather, he had an operation of all sorts because he had 9 children, 3 women in the business, and his 6 sons in the business. So he did everything, auto body work, engine rebuilding, towing, they did everything, repairs. My father wanted to primarily focus on just towing.
Okay.
Towing cars, trucks, and buses. He didn't want to do any more repair work. He had done that. He lived that life. He said, well, now we're just going to focus on towing. We're going to specialize in that. And at the time, it was that was the sort of the years when things were becoming more specialized. Cars were changing. It was probably the right time to do that. And that was his focus.
And I think I recall your father saying that he was doing towing on the Turnpike before there was a Turnpike.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, well, the Turnpike came through Middlesex County in probably 1948, 1949. A lot of the land here in East Brunswick was being purchased by the Turnpike to build the road. And yes, several of the bulldozers became mired in mud along the old farm trails that they were working on. And yes, we were called by the state police at the time to get the bulldozers that were stuck trying to build the Turnpike. So yes, he used to always enjoy saying, I was working on a Turnpike before there was a Turnpike.
Yeah, that's good. And I recall, how did it work with the Turnpike Authority and authorizing certain tow truck companies? How did that all evolve?
Well, what happened when the Turnpike opened in 1949, obviously there was Route 1, Route 130, Route 46, Route 3 throughout the state. And obviously the state police at the time were using towing companies for their accidents or whatever. So what the Turnpike Authority hired the state police to be the patrol,
right,
to enforce law and be the patrol on the Turnpike. So in that turn, the authority turned to the state police and said, okay, what do we do if we have an accident? What do we do? And then the state police made recommendations of, well, in Bordentown we use this company, and New Brunswick area we use this company, and so that's how the companies became identified by the Turnpike. And at the time, you received a contract from the Turnpike, and it was basically a contract of merit. If you didn't make a mistake or cause any problem, it was a lifetime contract. So we entered that contract in 1949, and
So you had a particular zone.
yes, our area was interchanges 8 Heightstown to interchange 11 Woodbridge.
Ah, okay.
So
So it was limited.
yes, every company had a limited area, and the Turnpike by design, you would handle the calls from exit 8 to 9 in the northbound direction, exit 11 to 9 in the southbound direction. The theory being no tow truck would have to turn around or make a U-turn on the highway. You would pick up the vehicle, exit at your exit, and go back off because U-turns were so dangerous trying to cross the traffic.
What exactly is a flatbed truck?
A flatbed truck is, well, as the Turnpike Authority called it, my Uncle Mark, my namesake, in 1961, he built a flatbed tow truck, handcrafted it in our shops. And the Turnpike Authority called it the car ambulance because basically it worked like an ambulance where you loaded the car up on top of the tow truck and transported it. And there weren't very many of those around in that era. We had the first one on the New Jersey Turnpike. And then, of course, now they're everywhere and anywhere. You can see them because they're commercially produced. But basically, it was a safety factor because you were putting the car and the occupants up on the flatbed truck and transporting them down the road. Where in previous time, you would be towing them behind them in a tow truck. Sometimes the people would have to stay in the car because there was more people than you could fit in a tow truck. So it was just a safety factor.
And what's a lowboy truck?
The lowboy, again, in 1977, we found this gentleman named Don Landau in Marysville, Kansas. And we needed to transport severely accident-damaged buses and trucks. And we needed to be able to put them on top of a trailer when they were so badly burned or wrecked that we couldn't just tow them with a tow truck. And Don had created these trailers that worked hydraulically that you could, with winches, et cetera, that you could load these damaged vehicles on. His purpose was to move corn binders out in the fields of Kansas. And my father contacted him and said, I want to buy one of your trailers, and explained to him what he wanted to do. And Don was like, that's not what they're designed for. He said, well, trust me, I'm going to, and of course, many years later, within a couple of years, we had 4 of them. It just exploded in our operation. We needed more and more of them because they were just such a handy tool.
Officially, legally, if there's a motorist on the Turnpike and they have a breakdown, what are they supposed to do?
Well, in 2023, you can hit I believe you could still hit pound 95 or dial 911, and the state police will get you aid. The Turnpike has control over who services you on the highway, whether it's the road service people or the towing people. All the tow companies are contracted for their areas, and that's the only people you can use, unless commercial people, trucks and buses can have private permits. But otherwise, if you're broke down in your personal vehicle, you have to go through the Turnpike Authority to be towed.
Do you have to stay with the vehicle?
You're supposed to stay with the vehicle. It even, well, in the old days, you used to pick up your toll ticket. It used to even say, if disabled, stay with your vehicle. Do not walk on the highway. But those days are gone, thanks to Easy Pass.
Have you found that often when you show up, or when you used to show up on the Turnpike, that the motorist was distrustful, mistrustful?
Well, it's a host of things. As I've said to you in the past, we provide a service that everyone needs, but no one doesn't necessarily want.
That really sums it up.
Yeah.
Everybody needs it, but nobody wants it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's sort of a funeral director situation. Everybody,
Yeah.
sooner or later you need one, but you really don't want to have to need one.
And you can't undo a crash. You can't undo a breakdown.
No.
So the person is already upset.
Right. True. Very true. So all you can do is try to keep the situation under control and offer whatever you can do to keep, to help them out. In today's world, it's not as difficult as it was in the past. I mean, you have the access to, mobile payment, credit cards, whatever. Back in the days of the 50s, people had to have cash to pay for services. There was no other way to do it, if you think about it. And So that was I think it was a much more troublesome time to deal with the customers, because if they were, if it was 3 o'clock in the morning,
they can't get cash.
Yeah, if they don't have any money, I mean, one of my favorite stories used to be with a family from New York would go to Great Adventure on Saturday morning with tons of money, and then they and the kids would play all day at Great Adventure. They get back on the Turnpike at midnight to go home with no money, and then become disabled. And now you have a family of mother or father with 6 kids, and there's no money, but they have a breakdown. It's a bit of a problem.
Currently on the Turnpike, as far as you know, what is the allowable charge for picking up?
Honestly, I'm not sure right now.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
What did it used to be?
Well, it probably, I'd have to put it in perspective of over 20 years ago, and I'm not really, I'm not really sure.
Okay. Let's say I'm driving a car and I'm a professional mechanic, and I think I can fix it. How much time would I be allowed by the Turnpike to fix my own car before I have to be towed?
The Turnpike rule is you are allowed a 2-hour minimum to try to make your repair and get underway. So basically, if the trooper comes along, and sees you there and says, "What are you doing?" You say,
I'm fixing my car.
Yeah, they can they'll report the car and say to the operations center, "This car's here. He's working on it, and he has that starts the clock." So if he's lucky, he can
If it's a small repair, he might be able to do it.
Yeah.
Another scenario, let's say I'm driving my car, I have a breakdown on the Turnpike. Can I just phone my AAA membership?
No, you can't, but the Turnpike Authority services, all the contractor garages are required to accept AAA for the tow off the Turnpike. They're required to accept the AAA card. So that and that was a long-standing argument, pushback from contract garages and the Turnpike. The Turnpike, the AAA wanted to be serviced on the Turnpike. The Turnpike didn't want it. The garages didn't want it. But finally, it came to be.
And compromise.
Yeah, and in actuality, when it did finally come to be, it did take away a lot of problems, because people were quite happy to take out their card. And it was over with.
Mark, I'm curious, how do you personally deal with the problem that the very nature of this business is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? How do you deal with that?
I've been doing it all my life. It's just the way it is. I mean, there's just, it's not an easy life, but when you grow up in it and then you choose it as your life profession, it just becomes second nature.
So if you're hiring somebody to take over when you're not physically there, it has to be somebody you really trust.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. In your experience, when you're driving along and you get these calls, do you ever have to actively engage in firefighting?
No. Mm-mm. No.
What do you do if you confront a fire?
Well, all trucks are equipped with fire extinguishers, but I mean, if it's a severe fire, then that's obviously you have to request fire.
Your tow trucks are equipped with fire extinguishers for a minor fire.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And do you or your drivers ever have to render first aid to the people?
No, not really. Because in this day of age, in most situations, between the EMS and the paramedic services, particularly in our area, it's just we're overwhelmed with services. It's not like we're in probably if we were in say some rural area of Montana, I might think that would be a situation, but not here.
Okay.
Services are.
Do you ever have to use acetylene torches?
Back in the old days, yes, but today, no. No.
Why not?
Well, first off, it's dangerous to have to use a tool like that, but because of fire. But back in the days, many, many years ago, that was very true. I mean, we did carry that equipment on our trucks back in the 50s into the 60s, primarily because a lot of the EMS and rescue trucks and things that are around today were not around. The tow truck of the tow truck company of those days actually acted as kind of a quasi EMS rescue fire truck.
And are your tow trucks equipped with floodlights to deal with nighttime operations?
Yes, yes, yeah. And I mean, if again to kind of go back in history, for example, in the Woodbridge train wreck in 1951, one of our trucks, which is one of the photographs we have here today to look at, the truck was equipped with floodlights and generator and torches, and 3 of our people went to the scene of the Woodbridge train wreck and worked for a couple days cutting apart the train cars that were with the people trapped in them, and because the call went out for rescue people and people with torches that knew how to cut, because the train cars were steel. They needed to be able to figure out a way to open up the cars and get to the trapped victims. And of course, the Woodbridge train wreck has a tie into the Turnpike Authority, because the reason that happened was because they had to put in a temporary bridge over where they were building the new Turnpike, right where the shoreline was going over top of the Turnpike. If without the Turnpike being constructed, the Woodbridge train wreck would have probably never happened.
What was behind the decision to paint all of your tow trucks white?
Originally, they were green. And Uncle Mark, to bring him back up again, we had situations where we were having problems at night with trucks getting hit on the side of the road because the green was, not. You also have to recall back in the 40s and the 50s, streetlights were not what they are today. And so he decided that that's it. Everything's going to be white, so we can see everybody can see where we're at, what we're doing. And from that day on, everything became white. In the early 40s.
To this very day,
to this very day, everything is white.
And how do you deal with, say, towing a Greyhound bus? They're so big. How do you manage that?
Well, it's part of our towing equipment. I mean, it's just, it's something that we have. It's the equipment we have. We use the Lowboy trailer, the Lowboy trailer. We can use the
Lowboy will work.
Right. Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And how would you go about raising, say, an overturned truck?
We have, 50-ton and 45-ton recovery cranes that we use, and we have
trucks with cranes.
Right.
Mm-hmm. How many trucks do you have currently in your?
Currently 7.
7 at the present time.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, we were as many as 30.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What are some typical causes for car crashes these days?
If you had to pick my personal opinion, the number one cause is the cell phone. Distracted driving. Because people are texting, talking, even if they're using, not using handheld device, they're not focusing on the driving because they're thinking about what they're talking about.
And when you show up to an accident, even though you're obviously not a police officer, but can you generally determine who was at fault?
Yes, maybe, possibly, depending. Yeah, I would say usually you can figure out what happened. Looking at the skid marks and where each car was sitting and facing or whatever.
Back in the day, like when your father was in charge, were you taking photos at these crashes?
Yes. Oh, yes. My grandfather started taking pictures, and my father took over from him. And I probably have, I don't even have the count, but there's probably thousands of photos and albums that from over the years. And some of them, it's really quite interesting to see crashes from the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s and on up. So.
And there's interesting stories about each.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And, I was fortunate that I guess I was a bit of a history buff. But when I was about 13, I sat my dad down with the albums and with a tape recorder. And I went through the albums with him, and I had him tell me what every picture was and what the story was behind it. And so thank God I have the history, knowing every little detail.
Now, I know you have 2 adult sons. But you discourage them from going into the business. Why?
Because 3 generations of 24 hours, 7 days a week, people working was enough. That was enough.
It was enough.
Yeah, somebody had to put a stop to it, so that was me.
And I believe we've talked about this before. In the May of 2026, you will reach the 100th anniversary.
Yes.
Can you share with me any plans do you have to celebrate that?
No, we're thinking we're going to probably do something, but exactly what that'll be, I don't know yet. I've been too busy to actually thinking that through, but we will be thinking of doing something, I'm sure.
Okay. Mark, over the years, you and I have talked about many crashes along the Turnpike, and it's usually an interesting story behind each of these crashes. Let's talk about some of the most dramatic ones. I'd like to start with the one where there was this truck that got out of control, and it rolled over a car, and there were actually occupants in the car, and it's a quite an interesting situation. Can you tell us a little bit about the background of this?
Yeah, well, as you can see, the tractor trailer went off the road. This is southbound on the Turnpike by interchange 8A, Jamesburg, and went down the embankment and went over top of the car. There were people trapped in the car, and as you can see in the photograph there, we're picking the tow truck's picking the truck off of the car so EMS can access the patients. And that was one of those situations. It was a rainy day. It was a very busy day on the Turnpike, a lot of crashes. And
a rainy day, so that accounts for why the truck slipped off the Turnpike.
Yeah.
And went sort of downhill.
Yeah, it hit the car, and then they slid down the embankment together.
The two of them went down.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we were very busy that day, and that's why, unfortunately, it was a situation where there was only one truck and one driver on the scene because we were so busy in so many different areas on the Turnpike that day.
Oh, because so many cars had slipped.
Yeah, yeah.
So
we were basically doing the rescue with the, at that particular time, it was the Jamesburg Rescue Squad and the Robert Wood Johnson EMS paramedics.
So were the people rescued from?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So nobody died?
No. And if you see in the photograph, I believe you can see, I believe in this picture, you can see them taking the patient out on the ground there. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Nobody died?
Yep. No one died.
Okay. And then I want to move on to the next photograph we have here. And this is a case, there was a tanker truck carrying gasoline, a full load of gasoline, and it overturned. That sounds like a very dangerous situation. Can you tell us what happened there?
Yeah, it was fully loaded with gasoline at interchange 12 Carteret. It had overturned early in the morning. And what you see in the photograph, we're rigging to prepare to upright the tractor trailer fully loaded.
With a big crane?
Yes, with the crane, yeah. Mm-hmm. Because it's safer to do it loaded than to offload the gasoline in that situation. And there was no spillage at all, so we did it with it fully loaded.
And then once the gasoline truck was on its own wheels, what did you do with it?
Well, we towed it away, and we took it back to the refinery off of exit 12 where they had filled it to get offloaded there.
And approximately when did that take place?
This would have been, I believe we have a date. Let's see. Yeah, we do have a date. July 29th, 1981.
Okay.
Again, this is going back to my dad's collection of pictures and him, and him wanting to always make sure he had all his photographs.
And the third crash I want to talk about, a fascinating thing, apparently there was a Purdue truck full of chicken, and it jackknifed, and then there was a collision with a truck carrying cars.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that was in a snowy, icy situation, and that's exactly what happened. It was a Purdue tractor trailer transporting frozen chickens to the New York City area. And he had jackknifed in the ice and snow, but because it happened so quickly, the new car carrier that was behind him couldn't stop in time, so he actually drove through the side of the tractor trailer. And actually, as you can see in the photograph, the cars are embedded inside in where the frozen chickens were. So, and that was right around the Milltown, East Brunswick area.
And when did that take place?
Let's see, we have a date on this one. I believe it's 1980, January 25th, 1980.
Okay. And you were able to tow both the car carrier and the chicken truck back to...
Wow.
Yes. Were they repairable, those two trucks?
Usually the Purdue trucks we would take back to their headquarters in Salisbury, Maryland. And then the new car carrier, well, interesting fact, the new car carriers, anytime a car carrier, if it's brand new vehicles, all those brand new vehicles have to be destroyed. The manufacturers demand that they all be destroyed. They don't want any liability issues. They won't sell a car that once it's been involved in an accident on a new car
That's
carrier.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Even if they appear to be okay, the fact that it was in a crash.
Right. I get liability reasons, I guess, because if something were to happen, they could always say something was a result of that crash.
So, Mark, for our listeners, if you're driving a car on the Turnpike or elsewhere for that matter, what kind of advice would you offer to today's driver?
Well, as we talked about one other time, in the Turnpike, you have the cars only lane, the trucks and car combination lane. If you're traveling in the truck-car combination lane, I would suggest to people to just be more attentive to truck and commercial vehicle traffic because, they're a lot larger, a lot heavier. They can't stop and maneuver as well as you might be able to do in a Honda or Toyota, where, of course, if you're on the car-only lane, it's a little different situation because you're only dealing with cars. Just to be safe and respectful, use signal lights, be cautious, give them time, and always remember that they sometimes people get impatient when a truck will be going slower or whatever. They have to realize when you're, a truck of 80,000 pounds cannot move out of the way as quick as someone in their, 4,000 pound car. And I think people, it's not really that they're ignorant of the fact. I think people just don't realize that there's this tremendous difference in size and weight and ability to just accelerate or slow down and stop. It's almost, think of it as a train. If you're riding in a train, they just can't stop on a dime. It's the same situation.
And what about if I'm in the cars only lane and there's these, I don't know what the right word is, people are they treating it like a race. They're weaving and they're accelerating.
I always jokingly call it as if sometimes you feel like you're participating in a NASCAR race when people are changing lanes rapidly. It's unfortunately it's just the way our society, things have changed and people just it's just the way things are. People just don't respect. And it's just the way it is.
If I see somebody doing that, should I phone it in to the police?
Yeah, you can dial 911 and notify the state police that there's a vehicle like that. The Turnpike has cameras and they have good control over their roadway, and they have multiple state police patrols everywhere on the highway. So that's probably the safest thing to do. Yeah. Don't ever. I'd never get involved in trying to tell someone, they shouldn't be driving like that. That because as we know, road rage is a whole nother crazy thing. They have to deal with today.
And what would you advise a motorist who suffers a breakdown? What should they say to the tow truck operator when the tow truck operator arrives on the scene?
Well, that's a cat in a hat question because some people realize their car is disabled and they just have to cope with it and deal with it. But some people just freak out when they're because they're, the car is their freedom, their vehicle, whether they use it for work or whether they use it for whatever. When their car is disabled, most people are in an accident. They're just freaked out because they don't have their vehicle anymore. What am I going to do? I got to do this. I got to do that. Kind of realize that we're just there to try to help. And I understand there are some tow companies that don't look at it that way. They don't treat people fairly, and that does happen. And that's it's like any other industry. Every industry has problems with businesses, but we try to do the best we can to be helpful to people.
Well, Mark, I want to thank you for sharing all these stories with us today here in East Brunswick. It was a real pleasure hosting you, and we wish you good luck on your 100th anniversary coming up.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure having this discussion with you. Thank you.